And did you knew who that guy was, right?
The Mark.
Yeah, that first one.
It looked like the dude who played his boy back in the day, but
No, that was fucking Buzz from Home Alone, dude. That's why I sent you that picture before. That was Buzz.
Was it? Okay, I was
Yeah,
wondering what the hell that. Okay,
that's
wow,
who that
dude.
was.
Saul Over Soon.
You're Slippin' Jimmy. Slippin' Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun.
Who moves cones? Who does that?
Money is not beside the point. Money is the point.
Saul Over Soon.
It's a real thing. I didn't make it up.
You're perfect for each other.
Welcome to Saul Over Soon, where we're breaking down the sixth and final season of the hit show Better Call Saul. I'm one of your hosts, Jamie G., associate of William Oakley. I'm here with my co-host, Magnum Mills, and we're going to talk about Breaking Bad, which somewhat confusingly is also the title of Better Call Saul.
And we're going to reference an episode of Breaking Bad titled Better Call Saul. So, yeah, get ready to be confused. I am Magnum Mills. Thank you for checking out Saul Over Soon. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, all the good ones. Just search for Saul Over Soon. We're on social media at Saul Over Soon. And if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear it. You can send it to sauloversoon@gmail.com, especially if you have any juicy theories. We love those. And please be aware that Saul Over Soon is a full spoiler show. We will be spoiling all events of every episode of Breaking Bad, every episode of Better Call Saul, the movie El Camino, the Better Call Saul Insider Podcast, the Breaking Bad Insider Podcast. Literally the only thing is that we're not going to discuss is any possible rumors, set leaks, screeners, that kind of thing. Other than that, it's all fair game. Like Cindy Crawford and one of the Baldwins, fair game. You've been warned.
At this time, we'd like to enter the details of this episode into the official record.
Oh, the record is all fancy and stuff now, Johanna. Thank you very much. And this is episode 11 of season 6 of Better Call Saul, titled Breaking Bad. Originally aired August 1st, 2022. This is directed by Tavish Nas. This is the 7th episode of Saul that he's directed. The most recent one before this was Planned Execution. That was the final episode of part 1 of season 6, one of the best episodes the show's ever done. He's pulling double duty here. He likes to please that booty because he also wrote this episode. He is the man with the sharp Wisconsin cheddar, and this is the 13th written by credit he has on Saul, again, the most recent being Planned Execution, where he also pulled double duty to please that booty. Gotta love the cheese man. The short plot synopsis is very vague, as usual. The partners escalate their enterprise to new levels.
You had me at please that booty. Now, needless to say, this episode was an emotional roller coaster. Before we try to make heads or tails of it here, let's each give our initial thoughts about the episode titled Breaking Bad.
I like that you specified the episode titled. Overall, I definitely enjoyed it. It was almost like not too much to take in, kind of. At the end of the day, a lot of things happened, but the plot didn't move terribly far. But it was a little bit jarring when, you open kind of in the color, and then you get the title card and then commercial, and then bam, you come back and you switch timelines. I didn't know if they were going to do it. It took a bit to adjust to the fact that that was happening. Overall, there's nothing I really disliked in this episode. I think I might have a couple of questions about some minor plot mechanics and stuff like that. But overall, I enjoyed it. We got the big cameos here. I think we're going to get a little bit more from the actors, so I don't want to pass a final judgment on that now. But for the most part, say whatever you wanted about the fact that, these dudes are older now and they're not going to look the same. I thought the chemistry was awesome. Really enjoyed it. What you got, G-Man?
I'm kind of in the same world as you here, Mills. It was weird because it took me a minute to kind of figure out what was going on. And, I like that they're staying true with like, hey, when we're in Gene timeline, some bitch is black and white, period. No bones asked, right? And so now we're starting to see like they're using that as a mechanism to go back and forth between timelines. And it works. It just took a minute because at first it was like, I was waiting for them to follow up that scene, the opening scene with Saul, being taken out into the desert. But it came back around later in the episode, which I thought was actually really cool how they did that. And there was a couple of the flashback scenes where it was related to something that was going on in the Gene world, and it brought back those cool flashbacks. So I actually really enjoyed that aspect of this, going back and forth. We said, hey, they weren't going to do 2 episodes in black and white back to back. And gosh darn it, we were right. They didn't. because of the flashbacks, baby. They had to throw in a little bit of color there. You're right. Not a ton really happened here, but what did happen was pretty damn robust, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's I forget the various cigar levels, but it would probably be of the Robusto level, and that would have been a hell of a flex, right? If they opened it with the, you know, the teaser in color, and you kind of get the idea of where you are, and then the whole rest of the episodes in black and white to the Gene tie line, and they just did the ultimate kind of little dick tease. That would have been a flex right there. I would have probably hated it in the moment, but you know, it would have been a very, you know, very, very flexy flex.
It would have
Stupid,
been
sexy, flexy Sanders.
I couldn't have said it better. Mills is on one today.
Let's do this thing.
It is now time to start jumping into timelines like somebody's trying to steal our leap.
Don't steal our leap.
Yeah, don't steal a leap.
We open the episode in color, as we alluded to, and Saul has a bag over his head. He's not making another reboot of Total Recall, so he must be in the crystal ship. The ship stops, and Saul's restraints are removed. Shout out duct tape. We're going to see a bunch of times in this episode. He's brought outside into the desert, and when the bag is removed from his head, he's staring at a pre-dug grave in the desert in a scene that we've seen before, very confusingly, in an episode of Breaking Bad titled Better Call Saul, while we are watching an episode of Better Call Saul titled Breaking Bad.
And like, look, I mean, I'm like, it's, you know, maybe we've had one or too many here, but it's just like this weird, like, cross universe. I mean, did they just have to do it like this just to give everyone like this, like, mental?
Yeah, the OCD part of my brain loves this. The fact that it's completely circular like this, and it's absolutely perfect. Like the first episode, it makes so much sense, but from an actual talking about it standpoint, especially if you're not really immersed in this, you might get a little bit confused. Like Saul would say, mucho confuso.
Yes, he would. Right up there with mucho dinero.
He knows that. He knows the avocado mucho dinero. He's very specific in his Spanish. You would think at this point he would have bothered to learn the language a little bit better, right? But that definitely matches up kind of with what we ultimately see in that scene in the episode titled Better Call Saul Breaking Bad, when they bring him into the desert. And that's what a lot of what this episode is going to do, is fill in the blanks from that specific episode. So stay ready to be confused here. And did you know right away that, well, like that Saul was in the RV?
My gut was telling me that is Saul, and it's that scene. That's what my gut was telling me, but it took me a minute to like bet money on it, right? Like I wasn't like all the way like, oh, I guarantee. It was like, I think it is, and my heart and my gut are telling me yes, but my mind is telling me pause for a minute here. And so I paused for a minute. I thought it was, but I wasn't 100%.
We talk a lot about the cold opens here, the teasers for these episodes, because they're so good. Where does this one rank for you? I mean, there's been a lot of great ones in season 6. Any thoughts on just where this kind of ranks, even in the season 6 pantheon, you know, not even overall?
It's a tough question because they're so phenomenal at doing these cold opens. I'd put this probably mid to just on the back half of mid. There's just been too many good ones this season for me where I can't automatically put this up to number 1 or number 2 or even number 3 for that matter. So it's kind of on that mid to back half for me, Mills.
It made a lot of sense why they did it, but ultimately I think the main point of it was to start us in color and then give us the shift back to black and white.
Yeah.
So I think it's fine, but again, if you had to cut one scene from the episode, that might be the easiest one to cut. So always, like you said, great as always, but maybe not as impactful as some of the others have been. And that brings us to the title card. We usually don't spend a lot of time on this, but if you've been paying attention slowly throughout the season, the title card has been kind of degrading, much like an old VHS tape would. And now we get to the point where the actual titled song lasts, I don't know, 2 seconds maybe, and you kind of hear old, you know, VHS, VCR sounds, and it just kind of blue screens. And just kind of any thoughts on this overall? Do you like what they're doing here as a way to kind of transition us, I guess, away from the main Saul timeline?
You know, when it happened for the first time last episode, I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And then I wondered, like, okay, will they use that to kind of like put a stamp on like, this is where we are now? And that was almost like, okay, Jimmy's dead, Saul's kind of dead, and now here we are with Gene. So I like it just because I'm from that era of like, I still have a VHS player, believe it or not. And I keep it just because it's like a fucking relic at this point. But like I grew up in that era when shit looked like that. So I'm a fan of it. I do miss like the old school with the lawyer up. Like I love the intro to this and I like that song and stuff, but I'm not hating on this all the way, Mills. I'm curious to see if they're going to ride this through. Like, will every episode from the final two here, will they be that use that type of intro? My guess is that I think they're going to.
Oh, you couldn't have set up any better of a teaser for our predictions section at the end of the episode. Stay tuned for that. After that, we go right into the black and white, surprisingly, right? You thought we started in color. No, bitches. After the commercials, we're back in Gene Land, and we see Francesca in black and white plunging a sink while people in the background are watching Jackie Chan Adventures, like a cartoon from back in the day. Francesca's the landlord now, and these tenants seem to be kind of like, I don't know, call them classic assholes. Francesca tells them to stop putting seeds and stems down the drain and to plunge it themselves. After all,
it's a simple up and down motion, like you're used to.
And shout out, Francesca, right? Like she's just like she's obviously not doing that great, but she's still kind of a boss, right?
Yo, Francesca is a ride or die 100%. I mean, don't get me wrong, she gets paid for her efforts. But she is kind of a ride or die for Saul here, and you got to hand it to her, the way she conducts herself. I mean, she's definitely boss like. She has a way to like put you down, but it's also hilarious and you don't really know she's putting you down. And so big fan of this little scene here with Francesca. It brought me back into like, okay, that is Francesca. Oh my God, that's Francesca. And this is hilarious. And she's going out freaking with a mic drop with the motion of plunging. So she a lady boss.
And shout out the dudes who played like kind of the douchebag tenants. They had some absolutely solid lines. Like when she accused them of putting seeds and stems on the drain, she's like, no, I don't do that. And she's like, well, what is it then? They're like,
regular sink stuff.
That did make me laugh a little bit. And then when they call her a narca instead of narco, and they're like, yeah, conjugate much? I'm like, y'all are way too proud of something. Like, y'all think you're scoring internet points, and that's not even like half a point. You're probably fairly neutral at that.
Yeah. Sink stuff. I mean, I guess,
I might use regular sink stuff. And like, if a plumber asks, what have you been putting on your sink? I might say regular sink stuff. That seems
regular
fair.
sink stuff. But what if he tells you your apartment smells like a skunk's butthole? I mean, that was a line from Francesca here, man. I mean, that was a real zinger, dude.
Especially if you actually look at it, I'm like, it didn't look great, but I don't know, skunk's butthole. That's something. Did you have any kind of feelings at all? Because we did, again, start out in color and then bam, we're back to black and white here. Like, were you cool with it? Did you kind of just roll with it, or do you have any kind of particular feelings when that happened?
Well, one thing that happened to me in this episode that didn't necessarily happen to me in previous episodes was it took me a minute to kind of figure out what was going on. It wasn't as clear and precise. I think I was a little bit used to the black and white, to where it wasn't like I wasn't really thinking about it, because after all, we just went an entire episode of black and white. So I kind of got used to it a little bit here, Mills, but it took almost every scene here took me a minute to kind of like settle into it and figure like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. Oh, okay, that's Francesca. Okay, here, okay, we're in this timeline, and again, I think the black and white is like this major stamp of like, hey, when you see this, you need to know you're in Gene timeline, period. And I think that's their way of kind of telling us without telling us. And you know what? It actually works. I'm not always a fan of something like that, but call me a Saul, homer here, but it works for me.
And this is honestly something that, according to the Better Call Saul Insider podcast, they didn't explicitly plan. But back in season 4, episode 5, Quite a Ride, there was a flash forward where Saul told Francesca that she needed to take a phone call on November 12th. And then last week, remember, we got all the football references, so we were able to figure out when it was. This actually sets up perfectly for that. So when she's here and she's looking at the clock, it's 2:05. She's supposed to take that phone call at 3. And I was live watching this and kind of tweeting along with it on Twitter and everything from our account at Saul Over Soon. And a lot of people picked up on this real quick. Oh shit, she's got to go to get the Saul call. So that's what we're about to talk about coming up here in a second. But I thought they did a good job here of rewarding the people who had followed along closely, so they were able to pick it up a little bit ahead of time. But still, on the other hand, if you weren't following along that closely, you didn't really miss anything, and you were just maybe a little bit more surprised when the phone rang and it was Saul the other end, or Gene, I should say.
Right. It's one of those little things, and this show does this so well. It's one of the little things when you catch it, it's like, oh, that's super sick. Like, that's cool. I caught it. I'm smart. It feels awesome. But if you didn't catch it, it's not like you missed something major either. It's basically like, for you hardcore heads, like, we're going to hook you up and give you little things, little nuggets that are going to make you like, oh man, I'm the man. Like, that's super cool. But don't worry. If you didn't catch it, you're still going to be like, oh shit, that's awesome. She's talking to Saul. So that I like that it can go either way here. Again, it's harder to do that than you think.
And after that, Francesca gets the fuck out of there. She goes for a drive, and we see that Saul's bench advertisement has been replaced by one for William Oakley and Associates. Francesca drives for a while. It feels very tense, especially because of the music, and we see that she's definitely being followed, at least for a little bit. Finally, she arrives at a gas station that's way outside of town. She looks at the clock in her car and at a payphone. It rings, and she hesitates for a long moment before answering. There's not a lot here. I think the main thing is shout out Bill Oakley, who we're going to get a little bit more information on in a minute. Like, he's definitely former ADA Bill Oakley, and you actually see a phone number and a website on this advertisement. They both exist. If you call it, it's a voicemail thing. You can leave a message, and if you go to the web address, it's actually a little bit of an old school website. So really cool here, and really kind of tense car ride, right? I thought the score was great here.
Score was great. And shout out to Francesca. We didn't really get to see her do a lot of, kind of solos, especially when it's like, a stressful, tense situation like that. I thought the actress did a fantastic job with her eyes, with, kind of quietly talking under her breath as she's trying to work through things, figuring out that she's, that she was being followed. I really like that she knew right away as soon as she recognized it to turn right when really she was supposed to be turning left. Again, just plays into the fact that because she's been around Saul Goodman, she's coached. When Saul's got a guy like freaking Never Doubt the Ehrmantraut, like when he's got Mike always right, Mike Ehrmantraut, like, he's learning shit from him, dude. Like, Saul's already good. I mean, he's slipping Jimmy, baby. You can see all of that mastery kind of infiltrate into the people that he trusted most and worked with, and one of which was Francesca. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I'm just surprised that you didn't identify yourself as the second story man when we began the show.
I should have. You can trust him.
We see that Gene is on the other end of that phone call. He's using a payphone of his own out in Nebraska. Francesca refuses to say anything until Gene gives her what he promised. Gene thought it was going to be after, but she needs it before. Gene gives her instructions to find some money that he hid nearby. Francesca puts down the phone and successfully locates the cash. And that makes it sound a little bit more easy than it was. I did think that the description that Gene gave of a rock was pretty amazing. It was a rock that looked like New Jersey, and Francesca was like, New Jersey? And he's like, well, Alfred Hitchcock with a fez? Does New Jersey look like Alfred Hitchcock with a fez? Like, I might see Dirty Jersey in a different way for the rest of my life now.
We got to put an image up there and just break this thing down, Mills, because I think it might, bro. I think it might.
Oh boy, yeah, that'll be fun to Photoshop.
Not to steer away from how crazy that is with Dirty Jurors, Brick City. But I love the fact of this hidden, that like, this was super cool, dude. It's got the freaking fishing lure, the string, it's connected, it goes into the freaking water pipe. I love this shit, dude. I love a good find it and seek it. And this was cool, man. I thought it was well done. And you kind of get a lot of this, the intimate details of some of the shit, whether it's the con or the / burglary that happens in this episode, or things like this. I like that little stuff, those little details.
Oh, the only thing I don't really buy about it is that Saul would have had the patience to actually stash that himself. I'm assuming, like, and I don't think even Huel would do that. That seems like Mike. That's a Mike job, right? The way it's done.
There was no half measures.
Like, that seems like something he maybe paid Mike a little bit over the top to hide for him. Plus, he knows Mike's kind of that one guy who wouldn't actually go back and steal his shit. So I don't know if we'll ever actually get the answer to who hid that there. Probably not. But my bet is the Ehrmantraut, baby.
My bet is it's Mike Ehrmantraut. There was no half measures.
That's a Mike
taken.
job. It's a Mike job.
It's a Mike job for sure. I love that he asked too, like he was concerned, like, is it all there? Rats haven't gotten to it yet. I mean, it was in a pretty substantial bag. And now we know from a date, roughly how long do you think that money was sitting there, Mills?
Oh, we can tell basically it's more or less like from early April to November, 6 months, more or less. 5 to 6 months. Maybe 8 tops. So depending on when he stashed it. Yeah. It's hard to figure out exactly when, if it was already there or whatever. Is this was one of his various, it would make you wonder, does he have more cash stashed around there?
My guess is it's he has more for sure. Saul in his prime was an incredible guy. Mills, what we get here is we get Francesca returns to the phone after she finds that cash, and she gives Gene his update. Things are still hot, even hotter after the death of Walter White. Skylar White made a deal, and Pinkman's car was found near the Mexican border. That leaves him, and only him, as the primary target for law enforcement. All of his money and front businesses are gone. Yes, you guessed it, even the beloved laser tag. The offshore accounts, it's all gone. All he has left is whatever he took with him. She also lets him know that, chills, baby. Kim called after it all went down, and she asked about him. She wanted to know if he was still alive. Gene tries to keep her talking, but Francesca feels like she's earned her money here, and she hangs up on him. Did you feel a little bit bad for Saul here? Like, can't you tell he just wants his old life so fucking bad, doesn't he? He just wants it back so bad.
It's kind of almost a backhanded line where after she says that, Francesca's like, your name came up, asked if you were alive. That doesn't it's like she asked, but like asking if you're alive doesn't quite feel like, oh, where is he? How is he doing? Is he okay? Like, just, is he alive is maybe not a ringing endorsement, but the way Bob Odenkirk says,
She asked about me.
you know what I mean? It's like he had never considered that this was an option again. And all of a sudden, like, his whole world opened up, and, maybe that's what crushes him so hard in the phone call later. We'll talk about that when we get there, but this was, I think, him, he'd kind of been, all right, I'm just Gene. Like, he's trying to be Gene. Now he's letting a little bit of Saul in, but he's okay still. But this is like the first time, like, he really probably considered that it could be anything else.
Yeah.
And also, he's doing pretty shitty from being stashed. He's been here like not even a year yet. Like, he's really doing a terrible job of hiding.
Yes, he is. And shit, man, he's got his pinky ring on. Like, I mean, he's kind of Saul, dressed up as Gene, I think, at this point. And I think that you saw that switch maybe a little bit last episode when he does his first Gene Con, so to speak. But a couple of great lines here, Mills. I mean, the Francesca line talking about Bill Oakley.
Remember Bill Oakley? He switched sides.
He came out, huh?
No, he's not gay. He's a defense attorney now.
And I thought this was just great writing. It was very funny, but also it kind of was cool how it came back, where you remember when Bill kind of like shitted on Saul's moral compass, right? For being a defense attorney. And it was kind of interesting how it came full circle. I thought it was a good bit of writing.
Absolutely. And I honestly feel like there's a chance we might see a Bill Oakley commercial next week. I feel like that might be a thing. Early prediction, just a tease. And Francesca did drop a little bit of a line when Saul asked how she was doing, and she says,
I'm just great. Prince Rainier proposed. The private jet is taking us to the palace on Thursday.
That's a direct reference to Prince Rainier, who was the Prince of Monaco, who married a huge movie star, Grace Kelly, back in the day. And that's, I think, also a reference. Remember, Jimmy and Kim used to watch all the classic movies, stuff like that. So I think that's a nice job of bringing it back around.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the name Tigerfish Corporation? I mean, this seemed like it was one of, Frank Reynolds with the Wolf Cola. Like, Tigerfish is right up with Wolf Cola, isn't it?
I don't think it's, adjacent to Frank's Fluids or anything like that, but it's a solid name. You get it because he brings it up the fish again later in the episode. So that makes sense, but you do have to say, like, dude, I don't. You're involved in business, so, like, let's just say business, but right? Like, I don't even know. Like, you would have to actually forge documents, I think, to put someone on a board of directors. But Saul did some shit to Francesca, but putting her on a fictional board of directors and not telling her, that's kind of like dirty, dirty, nasty, dirty, right?
It kind of sucks. He probably should have let her know. Mills, this was interesting when he was asking and fishing and wanted news. A couple of names came out here, almost all of which I did. The only one I knew of was Huel, right? And I guess he's back in New Orleans. He's a free man. Happy to hear that. But who the hell is Kubi? Who's Danny and Ira? I don't. Do you know these? Am I missing? Internet's smarter than me. Am I missing things? Internet.
One of those was played by Bill Burr. There's a couple other random references. I don't know if we know who one of those guys are. I know at one point, I've tried to get everyone to watch What We Do in the Shadows, and this is an actor you probably know best as Colin Robinson on that show. But he was in the early seasons. Remember, he was the dude with like the baseball cards, and like Saul got him off as a squat cobbler or whatever. He's actually the dude that wound up owning the laser tag.
Wow.
So he's referenced here, and the writers talked about that. Thomas Shaw talked about that on the Better Call Saul Insider podcast, that they were trying to get him on screen or whatever, but that was the idea when they named him, that he would ultimately be the guy who owns the laser tag. So they were trying to tie that back around. And dude, shout out Huel. I think everyone was worried. There always used to be those memes that he was sitting in that hotel room till he became a skeleton. So it's nice to see that he's okay. He's back in New Orleans, and that would be an interesting spinoff. Like, make it kind of like, I remember the Simpsons back in the day did like a spinoff showcase where I think Principal Skinner moved to New Orleans with some other random person, or with Chief Quimby, I think, and they solved crimes or something. I'm kind of there for a Huel, like a Better Call Saul NCIS Huel or something. I don't know, New Orleans.
Well, bro, what about if you just did? Isn't it weird to have an energy vampire run a laser tag? I mean, that would be good for him, right? That would be food all day, I guess. But like,
if Shadows could do that, that could work. Actually, we'll see. I would actually like that one.
Instead of in the Shadows,
laser tag based plots. Yes.
In the Saul. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out, but we'll mash that up after the phone call. Gene approaches a literal crossroads. He goes to a different payphone and he asks for the number for Palm Coast Sprinklers. That's right. Palm Coast Sprinklers down in Titusville, Florida. It's on a road that's named after a fish. That's what we know. His call is put through and he asks for Kim Wexler. Ooh. He believes she works there. The call continues, but we can't hear what's being said. Whatever it was, Gene did not like it at all. Dude, he was super upset, animated, totally not what we've come to expect from it was like an angry Gene. It was very weird. He bashes the phone. I mean, hard as shit. The phone base with the handset. Boom, boom, about 150 times. Kicks the booth so hard on the outside, he breaks the glass. Violent Gene? This is a territory I don't really like with Gene.
I mean, that's a little bit of a De Niro Pesci callback, right? That's a very famous move. Both have done multiple times, beating the phone on the joint. I have to think that's a little bit intentional there. The kicking the glass was pretty cool. One thing before everybody panics, the writers, creators have already made it clear, we will know exactly what this conversation was at some point. So it's just a spot where we're going to have to, guess about it a little bit. And I do have to say that shot at the crossroads, it reminded me a little bit of that scene. Remember when Kim's going to her interview in Santa Fe, and then Saul calls her because, the Casimiro, the judge, is the guy's in a fucking sling or whatever. And she makes a decision to kind of turn around, and that's a two-way street. And now shit's more complicated, right? Like, Gene's looking at the four ways to go, kind of like there are a whole bunch of options he has here, and he elects to go and try to contact Kim for the first time in years. So I think that's definitely a choice that at least probably informs where he's going from here, because he made that choice. There's other things he could have done, and he called Kim first. So
yeah, no, and it was kind of a bold move. Mills, I gotta ask, when he's talking to the operator trying to get dialed through, and he says it's on a road in Florida named after a fish. What fish were you thinking? Because this was not a fish that this wasn't what immediately came into my mind. And just trout. For the record, what was you were thinking? It was trout?
I was thinking trout, and it was tarpon, I believe.
Tarpon. What came to my mind was like dolphin or like fucking swordfish or like, I don't know. Maybe I was.
There's a guy who would roll up at some weird deli and be like, "Yo, You got monkey?
You got human? I've got
Really,
a taste for the meat.
You're hungry for human meat, but you're just trying to substitute with everything possible. I do think that makes sense because I'm pretty sure every road in Florida is actually named for either a fish or a Disney character. Does make total sense. Again, I thought this was a very interestingly, because again, you're shooting kind of like somebody on the phone reacting with no dialogue or anything like that. So they did it a couple different ways across the road. They come in tight inside the booth. They shoot kind of like almost a Dutch angle low through the booth. I thought they, again, made it as interesting as you could, considering everybody is at home screaming at their television like, what the fuck is he saying right now? Like, are my closed captioning not working? What the hell?
Once I started hearing like sounds from the street and stuff, I knew what they were going for here. And again, man, we could do an entire series about just how great Bob Odenkirk is, but what great work in that tiny little space there. I mean,
that's what she said.
Phenomenal work in that little box of the phone booth, man, because I mean, phenomenal work by Odenkirk there in all seriousness. I mean, you couldn't hear it, but you kind of knew. And I thought it was really well done. I actually liked how they did the angle from like across the street and you hear the traffic and stuff instead of, hearing him, and you see the animation. And then the next thing you see is literally close up of the base of the phone as he's banging the shit out of it. So I thought it was pretty cool.
This is one of those things, like usually we would save this for predictions, but you kind of have to talk about this here. Do you think he talked to Kim on the phone?
I don't know. That's what's so hard about this, Mills. I can make a case either way. I'm gonna say yes, he did.
So that means he got bad news from Kim, is what happened if he talked to Kim. I don't think this is the reaction he would have had if he got the call and she was like, oh, she died or something. Again, her former employer might not know that. I do think that her refusing to take his call could be interesting. And then he kind of goes off on some manager or something like that because they won't let him talk to her. That was originally I was going on, like, oh, does he need money to travel or something like that? I'm going to go with he didn't talk to Kim. Like, I think he was going for her, and for some reason or another, he didn't talk to her. But no matter what, there's no way to like really picture that he got any kind of news that would be perceived as good. So it was either basically Kim telling him personally she didn't want to talk to him, or having someone else say, she didn't want to talk to him or whatever. I mean, I guess, do you think he could have reacted that way if the answer was just simply, she doesn't work here anymore?
No. Unless he knows he made a massive mistake by calling her. He took a big risk. And if he didn't, to your point, he takes this big risk. And if he can't actually get to her, and he realizes that like he thought he knew where she was and he doesn't now, I can see that anger building up. I think in that case, it could demonstrate just how mad he is with his current reality. He used to be able to find out anything on anyone at any time as Saul Goodman. Now he can't find out anything. He's resorting to a payphone, trying to throw a net for, somebody on a street named after a fish in Florida. I mean, that's a big swing of power, bro. So I could see him maybe being so frustrated with not being able to accomplish something as basic like that, and then realizing, wow, I just took this risk and I can't get what I want. I'm just, now it's anger spilling over. I think you could make a case for that.
I think what you said made it pretty clear that he found out this information when he was still back in Albuquerque as Saul Goodman. So he thought he had it in his pocket. And then again, sometimes he loses shit in the memory, which is why he knew the basics of it, but he forgot maybe the street address because he'd memorized it before he left and he didn't write it down and bring it with him or something, or even hadn't thought about it in a while. Maybe then that, just somebody being like, she doesn't work here anymore, she left a couple of years ago, whatever, maybe he gets that frustrated because now he knows he has no other way to track her. And that does come up a little bit in this episode where, someone's like, yo, dude, like, about the fucking internet? Because he doesn't really, right? So maybe I'm a wild stab in the dark here, but maybe a show that's, set in 2010 is going to involve the internet somehow in the plot.
After the break, we're back at Cinnabon, and Gene does not seem super happy as he stares at the mixer. Jeffy arrives home in his cab and sees Gene's car parked nearby. He enters the kitchen and finds that Gene has helped Marion use the new laptop Jeff got her to get online. There are so many cute cat videos. I mean, if you haven't Googled funny cat video, just do yourself a favor and do it after this episode of this podcast. There's other stuff too, but mostly cat videos. I mean, right? What else is on the internet these days? Mostly cat videos. Jeff seems nervous about Gene's presence, but Marion has him get some glasses for the, you guessed it, schnapps, baby. They're drinking schnapps. Gene asks if he and Jeff can take their drinks to go, and they head out to the garage, with Marion being slightly suspicious.
Yeah, she definitely was like having a lot of fun hanging out with Gene, and they get out the glasses. She thinks it's gonna, all right, this just turned into a three-way. And then he's like, yep, we got to go in the garage and look at this car. And you kind of see her looking out the window, which is, I think, setting up another shot later on when she looks out the window at the garage. Just back at the initial Cinnabon scene, if you kind of watch it, it's this cool shot of the big mixer going, making the main dough, I'm assuming. And it kind of starts out wide and starts pushing in on Gene in the mixer, kind of the, the four-way, whatever, I'm not, that up on mixer terminology, but the paddle kind of Jonsky, it's spinning around. And as it zooms in, you kind of just get these shots of like where it's framed briefly, where it's just Saul and an exit sign, like pointed the other way. And again, it's kind of him thinking, like, I'm assuming, right? Like, am I Gene? Am I Saul? What am I doing here? And it definitely seems like he's almost made a decision, like he's going like almost like full out fucking evil. One other thing here that I didn't initially think was a big deal was the recasting of Jeff. A lot of people were kind of up in arms about it. And I did go back and watch a couple times, and it's definitely true that the other actor was more intimidating and whatnot. But I just assumed that it was a direction thing where they could have gotten a guy who did that or had this actor do that. So they made a choice to do it. But here, and we see it kind of a couple times through this episode, like they kind of made Jeff like a little bit too weak, right? Like all he did was get like a laptop for his mom, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I got, like, he's trying to make it so obvious that he didn't make a big purchase or something. And I don't even think Saul, even back then, like it didn't seem like that kind of a laptop. I don't know that was that kind of thing to get excited over. Point being that, Jeff did not seem nearly as intimidating as he did in his previous appearances. And I don't know, it seemed more obvious this episode than it did last episode, maybe.
Yeah, and they kind of planted the seed a little bit last episode where Gene kind of just like was like clearly his daddy, like he one-upped him on everything, and he was wearing the pants, he was in control, he was kind of like Mike, like you started to see like Mike come out in Gene, like the way he was like talking to these guys, and and so you kind of already established that like Jeffrey, first of all, he's a grown man going by Jeffy. That's number one. Number two, they kind of established that Gene was like he was kind of his little like minion or whatever, so to speak. So I guess it didn't shock me that much to see him like scared, because I thought of as like basically the explanation point on top of, last episode when Gene was like, you so much as see me cross the street, you look the other way. You know what I mean? Like this just kind of felt like, oh shit, he's back. And it's weird because we're not used to associating Gene or Saul or Jimmy with like this big sense of intimidation. I mean, Saul, you could make a case he had contacts with like the mob or the cartel and whatever, but we're not used to him being like a mob boss or like, it's not like Tony Soprano showing up at your house, right? So, a little bit different, but they established it last week for me with Jeff kind of reporting to Saul and being scared of him. So I think that had more to do with it than anything else.
You just made me picture Saul as if you remember the movie The Great White Hype. It's basically a big boxing parody, but Samuel L. Jackson's playing like a Don King type character. And like throughout the whole movie, everyone wants to punch me. He's like, touch me and I'll sue. And then at the end he says it, and then like dude finally punches him. I could just see that kind of being Saul, like touch me and I'll sue. Somebody finally fucking cleans his clock, so to speak.
Shout out Peter Berg and Damon Wayans.
Peter Berg becomes like a famous director and everything after that. Like he was the bull and did a Great White Hype. It's wild. Oh, you got Jeff Goldblum, John Lovitz. It's a great
Cheech Marin's in that.
Cheech Marin. It's a very underrated movie, as weird as it is. Watch the Great White Hype. I didn't mean to make this a hype video for the Great White Hype, but it is what it is. And just to be real, like to keep it really, really real, just to keep referencing Method Man, Jeff, like he bought that laptop for his mom, so to speak. But that was really so he could either like sell the shit that they stole and or look at porn, right? Like that's definitely what was going on.
Feels that way with Jeff. I mean, he's a grown man living with his 90-year-old mother. I mean, that's it's not a great look.
When they get out to the garage, Gene finally gets Jeff to stop talking after asking multiple times, and he asks Jeff about his work schedule. After hearing the various options, Gene tells him to get on to the 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. After that, they'll need to get their hands on some barbiturates. Jeff asks if they are back in business, and Gene offers them a toast to confirm that they are.
Were you a little shocked here, Mills, about the total? I mean, talk about a 180. Shit.
I mean, nightcabs and barbiturates. That sounds like a hell of a punk album title, but I'm not sure how that goes as a scheme, right? Like, because that seems like, I guess Jimmy / Saul's always been a little bit more subtle, right? Like, actually drugging somebody feels like a level he hadn't actually gone to yet.
He never went to that level with Kim, but we have no idea. Something tells me he's gone to that level as just Soul, a Soul Saul running wild in the world, filling his hole that has been, Kim leaving with doing crazy shit like this. So I wouldn't put it past him. We talked about it after last week's episode right here on this podcast, Saul Over Soon, where we were like, okay, will it be Jeffrey that tries to get back in and mess up? We never really speculated that it would be Gene going back to the well, jonesing for another fix here. And it totally is.
Right. We thought it was going to be, the Godfather thing where someone else pulled him back in. It was like, yo, dude, we spent all that dough. We need more or something like that. So it's a pretty clean thing here. Like, Saul chooses to be back in business. And just for the record, because we said back in business a couple times, I just want to point out that Back in Business was the 5th studio album released by EPMD. This is in 1997 after they were broken up for a couple years. So it was the first studio album since 1992. It included the hit "The Joint." And you can't get any better than a hit single called "The Joint," because it is "The Joint." Shout out EPMD, and that might come up again later in the episode.
Eric Paris making dollars. We kind of see it here. The next stage of the plan apparently involves Gene singing some, terrible, horrible, terrible with a capital T karaoke. Not his strong suit. Perhaps he should have gone with some EPMD, because he absolutely Billy butchers Brandy by Looking Glass. And I said, Brandy, what a fine wife you would be. When he's done, Mills, he heads back to the bar where his new friend is waiting for him. Apparently, Gene's performance was due to a bet that he lost. The other guy wants to keep betting, and he won't take no for an answer. Gene loses yet again and has to buy another round of drinks. The other guy's pounding his drink while Gene secretly siphons his into some sort of tube he has, you guessed it, up his sleeve.
And Gene is going by Victor with a K here. And of course, he literally has something up his sleeve. And we did famously have another big karaoke scene on Better Call Saul. It was from the season 4 finale, where we saw, it was, I think, when Jimmy was getting approved to the bar and Chuck vouched for him. And he hauls Chuck up on stage to sing The Winner Takes It All by ABBA. Jimmy's trying to, he's doing it and gets Chuck in, and then Chuck absolutely kills it. And everyone's like, loving Chuck and not so much Jimmy. But then in the end, they go home, they're all drunk, and they kind of sing the song together and they fall asleep. I thought that was one of the better moments in the show. Nice callback here for it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Victor with a K. Nice callback there. I think that brings, Gene back to a time when he was, falling in love with Kim, and they were falling in love with each other. That was fun to watch them kind of on their first ever little mini cons. And I appreciated that callback to Victor with a K.
It feels very Air Supply or something like that. It's fitting with kind of an 80s theme here. And speaking of fitting within late 80s, early 90s theme, the guy here, we eventually found out his name is Alfred. He's played by Devin Ratray. Yeah, the character's name is Alfred Hawthorne Hill, played by Devin Ratray. And if you're wondering, oh, that dude looks familiar, he was Buzz in the Home Alone movies, like the evil kind of older brother to Macaulay Culkin's Kevin McAllister. So he was basically playing an older version of that character, right? I wish they would have just made his last name McAllister, so there was a chance that Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, El Camino were taking place in the same universe as Home Alone. Plus, then the wet/sticky bandits that show up, and Joe Pesci showing up would be, and even Daniel Stern, fucking awesome.
That would be amazing, Magnum Mills. I'm surprised they haven't done a Home Alone reboot with Macaulay Culkin's kid, and you get Uncle Buzz, and Uncle Buzz is this giant uncle asshole. And you're right, he's basically playing the same character, and he does it really, really well. I gotta admit, I thought, how the hell is Gene going to lose this bet on the $100 bill with the hands, right? I mean, Gene's hand was lower. I still don't know how he pulled that off, but dude's got tricks. Homie has got some tricks.
We noted before, but remember, Gene was sucking the drinks up into his little secret whatnot. So this other dude's hammered. Gene, not so much so. They walk outside, but the fucking cab shows up, and Alfred's like, all right, one more bet, baby. He makes him do this thing with a matchbook. It's bad. He's an asshole. Gene loses once again, and Alfred gloats as he gets into the first cab that showed up there, and it takes off. Another cab shows up, but Gene waves him off. He empties a hot water bottle he'd had taped up on his midsection, and he empties all the booze off onto the sidewalk. In the cab, Alfred seems to be having a good old time, and the cab driver offers him a bottle of water free of charge. We see that the cab driver is Jeff, and there's probably a little something extra in that bottle of water. Then we hear Buddy check in via the radio, and Jeff lets him know where they're headed and what their ETA is.
Bob Bitchewitz, my good sir, Bob Bitchewitz. That is what is in that water. And
they were on the edge of fucking Omaha when the drugs began to take hold.
Somewhere, I think around Barstool. But yeah, dude, it was so funny to see again. But Alfred does a great job here. Just kind of said Brandy, just being the drunk jolly guy in the back.
Well, he's making fun of Saul's karaoke, is what he's doing. It's so perfect.
And he thought he played him. And I gotta highlight this for just a sec here, Mills. I thought it was really cool that the first guy we see them kind of take advantage of is like this huge giant asshole who not that no one deserves this, but it was kind of like, okay, he was a dick, like,
he was knocking on this dude because he could. But shout out Alfred, who did feel kind of alive, and he said something.
Got a lot of booze and nuts in my mouth.
Having not only that line, but having the guy who played Buzz on Home Alone, who was like famous for stuffing all this shit in his mouth, and the double entendre is just, Thomas Schnauz, you won that round, brother. You won that round.
What a line! I mean, that could possibly be the biggest "That's What She Said" opportunity in the history of "That's What She Said." I mean, that is a massive, just slow ball coming down center plate. That is just a lobbed layup. I can't think of a better analogy
slow
here.
Like he's too open. Like, oh, he's too open. He's too open.
It's
too easy, dude. It's too easy. And for the record, I would say that I had a pretty good idea of what the plan would be. Basically, that they were going to go into these guys' houses somehow. I didn't figure out what the actual nuts and bolts would be. But at this point, right, it's pretty obvious, right? Like, oh, he gets him drunk. They drug the dude, and then they're going to do something. So at least that seemed pretty obvious to me.
It was set up perfectly when Saul's in the bar. You see it earlier, and it's like, can we get some more nuts over here? I mean, they set it up perfectly to where it just I don't know, man. To me that was outstanding writing, and it was funny, and you kind of needed it because this was an episode that didn't have really any humor in it, so you kind of needed that.
Well, let's rephrase. It didn't have a lot of humor in the Gene timeline. I think
Correct.
there was definitely stuff to be mined that we get in the Breaking Bad timeline, but 100%. The Gene timeline is, again, almost built on its kind of darkness and whatnot, not only in the way that it looks, but in the kind of subject matter and delivery. And we'd see after the cab ride, Jeff gets Alfred home. He even walks him up to the door. Alfred pushes him away, says, I'm not going to tip you again. But as he kind of stumbles in after unlocking his door, Jeff puts some duct tape on the door jamb, preventing it from locking. He heads off in his cab, and he passes Buddy and his buddy, who are on their way into the house as he leaves. Buddy enters the house in order to his buddy, the dog, to sit and stay, which he does because he's a very good dog. Alfred is passed out on the couch, and Buddy takes his wallet. He pulls out all of his credit cards and identification and takes very careful photos of both sides. He also searches the house, finding financial statements, blank checks, and most importantly, a list of Alfred's passwords. Buddy finishes up, gets his dog and the duct tape, and then gets the hell out of there.
I thought it was pretty cool. The attention to detail. I like the tape on there. I like that they are giving you kind of behind the curtain. Here's how the sausage is made. Here's how every step of it is working. I thought it was a cool kind of era of the time with the camera, you know, because we're so used to like just pulling out our phone and snapping a quick picture and fucking uploading it and shit. Yeah, this was cool because it was like a literal camera. So little stuff like that made it for me. At first I was like, okay, they're targeting super wealthy people. I'm seeing brokerage accounts, I'm seeing tax returns, you know, but they're not stealing anything. They're putting it back. So it kind of felt like a blackmail play or something at first.
I mean, it made sense, right? Like this is what Saul's preferred modus operandi is. It's kind of the slow burn, that it's something that does get caught for a month or a couple of months, and by the time they catch it, there's too much time has passed. It's very difficult to backtrack and figure out where it happened. I do just want to point out for the record that last episode we talked about Jeff's friend being credited just as Jeff's friend. That we find out here his actual name is Buddy. Like, okay, show, like you're really fucking with us, right? Like this is an episode of Better Call Saul from Breaking Bad that is set during the timeline of Breaking Bad, an episode called Better Call Saul, and we have Jeff's friend who's named Buddy. Like I'm literally positive that even though they don't tell us, the dog is also named Buddy, because of course he would be. They would both be named Buddy because that's what they're doing. I think that's just, again, kind of the show both rewarding and fucking with the people who have followed it very closely or whatever. There for all of it. Just yeah, good. Yes, that was awesome. And yet it's like Akeem in Coming to America, going out the window and being like, yes, fuck you too. That's how I feel. So fuck you too, in the good way.
After the break here, we're back in color and we get to see what happened after the conversation in the desert. Saul enters the RV, followed by, our guy, Jesse Pinkman. Then Walter White.
And it's amazing because this is an incredibly, fairly short exchange. I shouldn't say incredibly, but this is a fairly short exchange. And half of the best dialogue from the entire episode takes place here. Basically, surprise, surprise, everything that Jesse Pinkman says is a banger. But Saul starts off by referencing James Whale's Traveling Roadshow being like the RV. And he's actually a very famous film director who made like the original Frankenstein, Invisible Man, that kind of thing. So that was a cool reference. And we hear Jesse talk about the crystal ship. We knew the RV was named the crystal ship. And if, you're of the wrong age, you won't know that's originally a Doors reference. So
love it, Magnum Mills. Give me more. Give me more.
Oh, I'll give you more. You two drive around like Mr. Softy scooping out drugs for all the good boys and girls. Mr. Softy is both a soft ice cream ice cream truck situation, and this should also be have they not heard of Big Worm? Do they think Big Worm is not going to do a goddamn thing here?
Exactly, dude. I mean, Big Worm literally, come on, what you
They're
want?
close to LA, man. I feel like Big Worm would have this shit on lockdown. He owns the truck-based drug business.
Yes, he does. Chili Fritos, all of it, ice cream in there. Yes. Let's just talk for a second because we have to. We've all been dying and waiting for this, right? When we finally got Jesse and Walt, how did you feel their chemistry was together? Did it pick right back up? Did it feel forced? Was it off? Was it weird? Did it work for you? Give us just a high arching overview here of like this was we knew it was going to happen basically from the start of the season. We couldn't wait for it. It's finally here. Thoughts on it?
I think the easiest thing for me was that I didn't really pay much attention to say the fact that Aaron Paul's voice is much deeper, or they're both wearing, hats, obviously hide their hair and that kind of thing. Like I just in my head was kind of picturing it as they were kind of supposed to look. Even Odenkirk is way thinner than he was when he actually played Saul for the first. He actually looks younger than he did. Cranston looks the same. Aaron Paul obviously looks a little bit older and his voice has dropped another octave. But I like that they went the route of not kind of digitally doing it. They could have tried. It would have been massively expensive and especially tough in that kind of dark environment. I enjoyed it, really. The dialogue was there. The chemistry was there. It was another thing they talked about in the Better Call Saul Insider podcast was that, these guys hadn't been these characters for a long time. So occasionally, say, Cranston would take it a little bit too much in Heisenberg territory. They'd have to bring him back down, like, all right, more Walter. But he would get it. And dude, the dialogue they have, especially, it's so interesting. And then hearing like Jesse Pinkman reference Lalo Salamanca, even though he doesn't really know who he is, it's just like it sounds like a little chill up your spine.
The ghost of Lalo like still haunts my
Saul
dude.
doesn't even want to talk about it. He legitimately is like, can we get out of the desert before I'm buried alive? Like just the fact that they're in a desert and they're talking about Lalo and he's just like, nope, nope. I need to nope the fuck out of this right now, like I'm Jordan Peele.
I'll tell you what, man. I had a split second where I was like, okay, was this already a scene that they shot that was somewhere buried in Breaking Bad? Because I thought it looked that much like it picked right back up in the Breaking Bad timeline to the point where even Saul's hair was a little bit longer in the back.
Doing the comb over, baby, the classic comb over.
Yes, it was a little bit like he looked like younger Saul. It brought me right back. Like I didn't notice, like I had to actually think about it. Like, wait a minute, this is happening now, or this already happened? I realized, like, oh no, this is Pinkman and like this is Aaron Paul, 2022, and this is Cranston 2022. I thought they did a really good job with it.
Like Odenkirk is like full on Saul here. And think about how resilient he is. He goes from being 1 second from being shot in the head into this grave in the desert to busting into their RV and just having a good old time playing with the flasks and fucking with them and having conversations and basically trying to recruit them almost.
Yeah.
I thought that was amazing, and it perfectly captured the tone like that. It got it. I think that it was a scene that we never saw because we know they went into the RV and they went back to civilization after. But you have to think, and that's what, again, on the Insider podcast, he said, it's like, well, what the fuck did these guys talk about? Like when they're in that RV on the way back, and then they make you kind of, have the fuel pump problem, so it sits there even longer. But man, it was a pretty brilliant way to do it, I think.
100%. And as soon as Saul finds out they're making the blue stuff and he's Heisenberg, and dude, they may have had to coach it up, but Walt was straight up Walt with like, the bickering and the controlling of what Jesse does and says, the cheapness of I'm taking the 80,000 as a starting point for negotiation. And, Saul coming back with the great line, take it any way you want, but that is the price. I thought they picked up perfectly. And I love that whole, the starter, the radiator thing, the car didn't start. It allowed the bickering twins of Walt and Jesse to come to life, where Saul really didn't know that yet. And so I thought that was really cool, man. Really enjoyed the scene, brilliantly done, and did not disappoint me as a fan at all.
And what I thought was kind of really interesting, not only do we get to hear, Jesse Pinkman say, who's Lalo? But at the end of it all, he says, how about, you being freaked out about something about Lalo? But he says, I never heard of no Lalo on the street. And Saul says it's nobody. This hasn't been that long. I mean, it's been, I don't know, 5-6 years, maybe. I think it just goes to show you, kind of referencing that conversation between Mike and Miguel, Nacho's father, just like what happens to a gangster, right? Like it's all this, but then all of a sudden you're done. And within like a couple of years, no one even remembers you existed anymore. Like Lalo was the man for a minute. And Jesse Pinkman was like, he's Captain Cook, the dude with his ear to the street. He had no idea who he was. So I thought that was kind of brilliant to also kind of illustrate just how fast you burn out in this game. We do actually see in the episode of Breaking Bad titled Better Call Saul that they do give the 80 grand and Saul takes 50 up for himself. And then he gives the other 30 to like that dude who remembers like the guy who professionally goes to jail for people. And he has to like sit on the bench near Badger. And it's a weird episode where like DJ Qualls is the undercover cop and everything. And solid shit though. We do see the Aztec again and shout out the Pontiac Aztec. It was a thing.
It was a thing. You got to hand it to Saul, man. He takes 50, gives the dude 30. That's 80. 80's the price. That is the price.
I mean, for what it's worth, I was enjoying the Laurel and Hardy vibe, but not so much a fan of the Bickersons.
Another great Saul line.
Yeah, and I do have to say, right before we get out here, is there were a couple of cool shots here, especially the one where Saul was holding up that round bottom flask, and you kind of see Walt distorted through it and everything. I don't know if they were really going for something or just look cool, but either way, it was both something and it fucking looked cool. And what's really cool is that we get a dissolve from there, and we go kind of right from Breaking Bad when we see the grave into the black and white world of Gene, where he's lying in his bed. A knock at the door gets him out of that bed, and he retrieves a package from his stoop. It's that stupid massage device that we've seen him use before, and we'll see him use again. He's putting it to use when the montage begins. Gotta love a good Better Call Saul montage. We watch as Gene, Jeff, and Buddy do what they did to Alfred to many other marks. They're stealing their identities and then selling those identities to somebody else wholesale for cash. They seem to be doing very well. They're stacking bundles. It's not quite stack bundles, but they're small bundles, but bundles nonetheless. And they got a lot of cash, but Gene is acting more and more like Saul Goodman.
How does Gene rather, how does he have this hookup with the selling the identity shit? Like, how did he get that? We know he doesn't have the black book anymore, or if he did, he doesn't have it for Nebraska. How did he find that? Is there a vet there? Like, I wish we could have. That's one little plot storyline here that I wish we could have found out.
I'm just assuming that was Jeff or Buddy, that they had some kind of in with somebody there or whatever. You know what I mean? Because they had to kind of fence all those other goods they got. So assuming that they had the ability to do that, it makes sense, I guess, that, you know, this was in the nascent stage of identity theft. So it was real easy on their fucking end.
Yeah.
Look at all the shit they got, like blank checks, you know, financial statements, online passwords. If you have all that, it would take you years, and especially when no one else was really doing it yet. Good luck. You were probably, you know, after writing the A there, to paraphrase the South Park back in the day. How do you like the montage here? I thought it was, you know, it had some cool parts, but I don't know. I wouldn't say lackluster, but I preferred last week's montage of the Gene montage that we got so far. Any thoughts on the montage?
I think I probably prefer last week's too, but I did like the little stuff. And there's some cool moments where, like, you know, they're kind of getting into the minutia of it all, and he forgets the tape and then comes back right as the music's hitting and pulls the tape off the side of the door and stuff. So you kind of got to see it build up like clockwork. And then you also got to kind of see them all stack bundles in the house with the cash coming in, Gene adding it to his little, you know, place in the closet under the wood that he goes to. So I thought it was okay. We've seen him do huge, elaborate cons that last basically half a season or a full season, and we've seen him do these cons now that can be compressed into an episode. So I thought this montage kind of tied up any loose ends with this con that maybe were out there for the viewers.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I did like they had the nice touch here, because remember when Saul couldn't be a lawyer anymore, so he's hustling the phones, and you see him give Jeff and Buddy the burner phones here. Thought that was cool. And then there was the shot where they showed all the licenses, the driver's licenses lined up, and that reminded me of when they had the Post-its on the back of the painting, kind of. I don't know if that was an intentional homage, but I did enjoy it. That was good stuff. And when that montage ends, we see that Gene is working on one last mark. But it turns out that this guy has cancer, like real cancer, bad cancer, Walter White cancer. After hesitating for a moment, Gene goes about his business and continues the con, eventually getting him into Jeff's cab. This is bad, right? Like this, I know they're not trying to make Saul unredeemable, probably. They want to keep it gray, but this is definitely a check mark into the, like, yeah, dude, you probably could have let this one slide, right? And the dude doesn't even seem like that much of an asshole.
Not at all. Especially compared to what we saw with the other guy, right? I mean, it's a huge difference. And it also, look, I think the point here is it brings out some of the complexity of you know, Jimmy, who turned into Saul, who now had to be forced to turn into Gene, and what he's going through from whatever happened in that phone booth, and pushing him to kind of like go to this dark place, a place that honestly, I sat right here on this podcast in weeks past and said, I'm glad that they didn't make Saul kind of take the route of Walter White. Right at the end, you kind of hated Walter, and he was a horrible person, and you weren't necessarily that mad to see it all go down that way. With Saul, they haven't really done that to the point where you're definitely rooting for him for sure, you know? And so this was kind of an interesting push. And I think that in the end, we'll realize that he's doing this push and becoming somebody he's not, simply because he's hurt so badly. Doesn't make it right, but I think, to your point, it illustrates and almost emphasizes that the size of that hole he's trying to fill, that he just can't. Mills, did a part of you just for a split second think maybe, just maybe, Gene wasn't going to go through with this one?
I was hoping so, but like the show moved on before I could really even consider it, really. Unfortunately, it felt kind of like, again, like it's hard to do it without spoiling the boys, but there was a certain point where you hope Butcher was going to say something to somebody, and he didn't, and you were like, oh yeah, he's kind of a dick.
He really should have, man. I'm still mad at him for that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not quite being a dick, but there's a break, And we're back in color and we're in Saul's office. Yeah, he's kind of being a dick, but he's also using that massager that we saw him just get when he was Gene. And he gets a call on his Bluetooth from Francesca. She reminds him to take his various vitamins, just like he talked to the cancer dude about. I guess he wasn't lying about that. And to file a brief, which he had forgotten about. And oh yeah, his 12:30 walked in. And that 12:30 is none other than Mike Ehrmantraut. He makes Saul stop using the massager, and they finally get down to business. He's got reports on a cheating wife and a possible solid second story man, but we're most interested in his report on Heisenberg. Heisenberg is named Walter White. He's a high school chemistry teacher, and he's dying of lung cancer. He's an amateur, and Saul should stay away from him. Saul thinks that this Heisenberg guy, he's got something going on, and that he's clay that Saul can mold as he sees fit. Mike strongly disagrees, to say the least.
First of all, there's such amazing callbacks and writing here, but I love that the massage thing came back into play. Do you not want one of those? I also love kind of Saul's kind of cockiness with Mike, and then Mike just being like, I'm either going to leave or I'm going to put my foot through your skull. Like, it's just great line here by Mike. I just give me more Mike and Saul, bro. Like, that's the best.
Really, I have to have a massager that I have to lay on the floor and kind of wiggle around with. That just, I don't know, man. That does not feel relaxing, right? Like, it's supposed to be relaxing. Like, if you were LBJ and you wanted to have your underlings give you reports, you'd have them do it on the shitter, right? Because that's relaxing. Yes, you are right. These characters have excellent chemistry, but it's interesting to see because they're definitely in a little bit of a different place than they were that we've ever kind of seen them before, right? Because it's definitely something more different than they were in Better Call Saul. But when they're in Breaking Bad, it's a little bit different because, again, these characters were created at different times. Like, Saul was created, then Mike was created because they didn't have access to Odenkirk, and then Gus Fring came along and they kind of mashed them all together. So you can get kind of why their relationship might not follow like a perfect arc. But I thought this was kind of right here, right? Like, it was like playfully, whatever, like, Mike knows that Saul is being a fucking, kind of a dickhead because he's Saul, but also eventually he'll talk turkey and let him pad the bill a little bit.
Mike had an intimate relationship with Saul way before the Walter White comes in. And like, I thought this was cool because you hear Mike kind of talk about Walt as being like, he's small potatoes. Like, and they even reference like, what does he think about him? He being Gus Fring. And, he's like, he doesn't think anything. He's small potatoes. Like, I thought it was kind of cool to hear this and see this kind of before everything happens in the Breaking Bad timeline. I don't know, man, call me like into that type of shit. But I thought it was really cool because we know that eventually Walter White turns into, small potatoes wouldn't be how you describe them. Would it, Magnum Mills?
No, probably not small potatoes. I'm trying to think of a better name, that's not big cojones or something like that. I would just say, like, this is the dude who knocks, right? Like, that's his whole thing. Then he is the one who knocks. Maybe I wouldn't say spoiler alert or whatever, but I think that Saul is kind of trying to channel that in the Gene timeline, right? It really feels like he's trying to channel a combination of Heisenberg and Mike and Slip and Jimmy kind of, and see if there's some kind of mix of those things that will work. And I certainly think there's a universe where that's possible, but he doesn't seem to really have the the mix dialed down correctly, so to speak. It's just the line where Saul says, like, because Mike's shitting on him about his massager, so Saul says, you should try one of these. You walk like Frankenstein after he was probed by aliens. And that's not even like, talk about a line where this is a line where that Mike and Saul have to have at least a fairly friendly relationship, because it's when Mike gives Saul pictures of a wife cheating on her husband, and Saul says,
well, at least I know they didn't spot you. No one could stay that aroused with your mug peeking through the window.
Like, that's Jesus.
Yeah, he's throwing some zingers, man. He's throwing some zingers. That Mike isn't a guy that would allow that type of talk either. So this purely seems like Mike is just working for Saul here, right? Like not a hired gun, but a hired PI basically, and probably the world's best PI, to be honest with you.
I mean, that's what, if you, like I have just watched the Breaking Bad episode called Better Call Saul, we see the end game of the scene we're going to see later when Saul walks in to meet Walter White in the high school, and he knows all of this shit kind of, and he says like, oh yeah, like my PI gave me all this info. He charged me for 3 hours. I bet you it only, took him 1 or whatever. And that's kind of the first Mike reference, although at that point when that happened, Mike Ehrmantraut wasn't even a conceived character yet. So, really cool stuff. Again, just so many lines about Saul saying like, oh, I got more second story guys in my book than pimples at junior prom. That was a good one. And even the interesting idea of Saul seeing Walter White as clay that could be molded basically into a money-making machine for him. Whereas Mike's like, yeah, fuck that dude. Like product, whatever, like, yep, he's an amateur, just not fucking worth it. I thought that was an interesting kind of concept, and maybe something that would, provide a reason where maybe Mike and Saul wouldn't be as close, in the coming years, because Saul got closer to Walter White.
Yeah. Well, you could tell that Saul doesn't want to give up on the Walter White thing. Even Mike, with Mike saying, let it go. Let it go. He's nothing. He's a nobody. He's an amateur. Let it go. So shout out Saul. I guess he knows a money-making machine that he can mold when he sees one.
There's so much here. Like just the irony of Mike calling the man who ultimately kills him a complete amateur. That's just rough. Like he legitimately calls Walter White a complete amateur, and that's the dude who gets him. And I don't know why they did it, but when Mike first walks into this scene, he's wearing those fucking sunglasses. I know, like, he's probably trying to keep a low profile or something, but I don't think we've ever seen Jonathan Banks, even in Bagman, out in the middle of the desert. I really don't think we've ever seen him wear sunglasses before. So it's just a very interesting choice here, I feel.
Yeah, I don't know. Even when he was doing the recon work on Tuco and stuff, I don't remember him in Hector. I don't remember him like wearing sunglasses out in the desert, spying on him with the sniper rifle and stuff. Like, I don't remember that. So might be the first time, man. Interesting choice.
This is both an incredibly funny line and incredibly ironic when Saul kind of diffuses the whole situation about him asking about Walter White when he says,
guy with that mustache probably doesn't make a lot of good life choices.
Gene Kakovic is currently rocking that mustache, and he is making some pretty fucking poor life choices, right?
Outstanding writing here, Magnum Mills. I mean, you can't say enough good stuff about it. He is making horrible, given the ramifications.
Morissette wrote this episode. I feel like it's dude, the irony is so heavy.
It's very heavy. I do think, and
a little bit too ironic.
Yeah, I mean, it's rain on your wedding day, dude. And after the break, we're back at Gene's house in the Gene timeline here, and we see him fixing himself another drink without skimping on the lemon juice. We believe that's what it is. Hard to tell in black and white. He gets a call here that angers him, and he tells somebody to, and I quote, tell him to get his ass back to the garage right now. Again, angry Gene here, kind of Gene the boss here a little bit, right? I mean, he's not totally Tony Danza, but he's in the game.
Yeah, he's definitely boss bang here and pretty straightforward. I think the one interesting thing is that we see that initially he's watching some kind of documentary about like migrating animals and having to kind of change your diet and do what you have to do to survive and everything. And, for the record, he does change to like some kind of like women workout video where he's just watching shaky butts or whatever, but he's going to have to fucking do something about that. What's he going to do? We're not quite sure. But we head back over to Marion's house, and she's still watching the fucking cat videos. She hears some barking dogs and looks out of her second floor window when she sees Gene and Buddy heading into the garage. Gene is pissed because Buddy opted out of robbing the mark with cancer. Buddy's father also died of pancreatic cancer, and he just can't bring himself to do it. Besides, he already removed the duct tape. They couldn't go back in if they wanted to. Jeff tries to appease both of them, but to no avail. Gene fires Buddy and orders Jeff to take him back to the house to finish the job. On the way there, Jeff comments that while he's down for this, the guy might not even be passed out anymore. He's not even sure if he drank the whole bottle of water. Gene tells him not to worry about it. It'll be fine. Jeff drops Gene off at the Mark's house with instructions to return to pick him up in 20 minutes.
We touched on a little bit earlier here, but it kind of felt like Jeff, like he basically wanted to side with Buddy here, right? But couldn't. And in the end, I don't think Jeff feels great. He doesn't want to do this either, right? And I think he's kind of somewhat surprised and maybe a little sketched out here on the fact that Gene wants to so badly.
It's kind of like Gene's shtick fails a little bit here because he again rolls out the speech about you'll get over it. Pretty soon you'll forget about it. It's like it never happened. It really feels like at this point it's just something that he's telling himself, right? Like he's saying it out loud, but really he's just trying to tell it to himself that he's going to forget all this shit. Because Buddy makes a pretty good point, right? Like, oh, we got all this cash, dude. Like, we don't need this one. Just let this one go. And that really feels like what Jimmy/Saul told Kim a bunch of times during the Hamlin thing. Well, not a bunch, but at least once or twice. Like, dude, we could just stop this. Like, go do your thing. We don't need to do this. And she kept pushing. So I definitely think they're trying to make some kind of, parallel there.
Good point there. And, a couple of good quotes here by Gene, but I guess, were you surprised here that he was not going to back off this one at all? Or did you kind of expect it going into this?
No, not really. I mean, this was so goddamn specific that, like, really? Like his, Buddy, who kind of seemed like this dude who would be down for whatever, is just like, I can't rip off a guy with cancer. I'm sorry. And you're like, yes. You do get, Gene giving the line, so a guy with cancer can't be an asshole. Like, I have a lot of experience with that, trust me. But yeah, so that's kind of generalization, right? Like if you met one dude who drove a Toyota, are all people who drive Toyotas assholes? Like that's, especially with cancer, that's being a little bit specific, I think. But I thought the most interesting line was when Gene says,
I have to weed through all these saps who have wives and families at home, find somebody who's alone with money.
And think about last episode when he had to buy for time and he starts giving that speech to Frank. And what does he say? Like, he's empty. He has no one waiting for him at home. He has all this. And now he turns around and basically disparages the things that you could kind of tell he maybe wished he had here. So there's definitely, shocker, more going on under the surface with, Gene/Saul/Jimmy/Victor with a K than it would initially appear.
Yes, it is. Mills, do you think that is why he is so insistent on doing this job? Like he feels totally lost now and at his breaking point, and just the mere mention of Kim, it almost felt like he was fishing for something, but I don't know that he was fishing for Kim, because throughout the entire Breaking Bad timeline, we never once heard reference of Saul reference Kim. So all that time has passed since he's spoken to her or, seen her that we can conceive here from what we've been shown. Was just the mere thought of hearing her name, did that push him kind of overboard here?
I think it did. I mean, they did say, at least Thomas now said on the Better Call Saul Insider podcast, that Gene has money still. Like he's not doing this for the money necessarily. It's more or less to, that's how he deals with shit, right? Like when Kim left him last time, he became Saul. So something happened on that phone call and he shifted back into Saul mode to deal with it. That does make a lot of sense. Again, we've kind of talked about, is it Kim on the phone? Is it not? You have to wonder, right? Like what it all is about, what's on that phone call. Unfortunately, it's hard to really, make heads or tails of it without taking a stand of like, did he talk to Kim? Did he not talk to Kim? What's up with Kim? But I think the important takeaway is that whatever his motivation going forward is, it's Kim based, right? Like he doesn't have anything else left.
As the cab door swings shut, the door to Saul's caddy swings open. Saul heads towards the science department of the J.P. Wynn High School. He's there to see Walter White and have a conversation that we saw way back when in the episode titled Better Call Saul of Breaking Bad.
Thank you for the clarity there. I thought it was pretty cool because we see both the transition was awesome from black and white there by using the car doors. I thought that was fucking slick as hell. And as Saul walks in, we know what's going to happen here. We've seen the other side of that conversation, but now we understand where he got the information from. I thought that was just set up really well. And yeah, I mean, there's not a lot else to it than that, other than they do a great job of then setting up the shop where Saul's about to enter the high school, and then bam, it kind of cuts back to fucking Gene, And Gene's finally, he got Jeff to go there, drop him off at the fucking house. He's going to do the job, and the door is fucking locked. So he punches the window, goes in, does the thing. He punches a little window on the door, unlocks it, lets himself in, and the credits roll. But they almost immediately cut to, and if you don't want any type of teaser spoilers, 3, 2, 1, last chance to get out of here. There's a quick clip of a cop car rolling up, 2 guys getting out in the black and white. It seems that the implication is that Gene might get caught, but let's be honest here, right? That's so obvious that there's no way that's what'll happen.
I do think it's going to be a little bit like, what are we looking at here? I don't think it's going to be, Gene gets caught and like surrenders. If anything, Gene gets caught and he maybe has to kill that guy or something. I mean, who knows? But I do think there is going to be something, and there's going to be a kind of a little bit of a twist here that maybe we're not expecting.
Now, that seems fair enough. I think there definitely has to be some sort of twist, because it would be, I mean, I guess you could argue it'd be interesting, but he can't get caught like at the beginning of the next episode and go to jail. Unless we're going to do a whole bunch of time jumps and something, and I don't think that the show's going to go there. It would be wildly interesting if they make Saul go to jail for like 20 years and then did the whole thing in like a super flash forward. I never even thought about that being a possibility. I guess that could be kind of interesting, but I just don't think the show's going to go there. I'm there for it, but it does seem that Saul's a bit, keep on him Saul, but Gene is a bit unhinged here. Like, he's trying to channel too much Heisenberg while thinking he's smart like Mike and street smart like Saul or whatever. And he's going to pull out of this, like, just going into this dude's house. And I don't know, like, is there a chance he, like you said, I guess I never really considered it before. Maybe he would like just kill the cancer dude. Be like, well, fuck it, you're going to die anyways. That would be like, not quite Ozymandias, Walter White level, but that would be a line.
Oh, definitely. And he's crossing one here already. The whole point of this con or robbery, whatever you want to call it, is it's an SBVD, baby. It's a silent but very deadly. Okay, this is a situation where the person being scammed doesn't know. This dude is gonna know. Even if Saul gets away with it, Gene rather gets away with it here, the guy's still gonna know because his freaking door's broken. His house has been burglarized. Now it's one of these things where he's definitely going to call the cops because he's going to know his house been broken into. So or there's going to have to be some crazy cover up here that Gene does. Either way, it's just a bad look. I think it's to emphasize the fact that he's really struggling here, and he's pushing too hard, pushing too far, especially for a dude who's all this shit went down. Dude, your ass needs to be like non-existent for a hot minute, bro.
To paraphrase, you best check yourself before you wreck yourself.
It is now time for Never Doubt Ermintrout. I was worried for a minute there, but just when I thought I was out, it pulled me back in. Mike shows up and drops some straight up knowledge on Saul at the end of this episode. Was he right, Magnum Mills? Was he right?
You goddamn Skippy. Look, he did underestimate Walter White. That's ultimately his downfall. It is what it is. Walt's kind of his blind spot, but look, Mike is crystal fucking clear, right? Saul should avoid dealing with Walt. It will end badly. He's a fucking amateur. All Saul had to do was listen to him. He'd still have a golden throne and his world famous breakfast bar. If you don't listen to Mike, you deserve to get what's coming to you.
And that's why when I grow up, I want to be like Mike.
Who doesn't really? Who does not want to be like Mike? And once again, we don't get much attorney action. Shout out to Double A's in this episode. However, we do find out that former ADA Bill Oakley has switched his stance and he's gone over to the dark side. Jamie G, have you ever encountered anything like this in your attorney adjacent experiences?
Well, this one dude was trying to bring me over to the dark side, but I turned him down. Then he got pissed and started claiming that he was my father. Shit was weird and I had to bail.
Yeah, that's Empire Strikes Back, buddy. You doing a Star Wars thing?
Ah, I see your Schwartz is as big as mine.
And that's Spaceballs? You want me to tell you to chew your gum, girls?
You're the one who called me on an unlisted wall.
Hey, I mean, bathroom walls should be unlisted. Look, dude, anything else that's actually about lawyers going over to the dark side here?
No, but I do have a bit about getting dark meat from KFC. I don't know if I should do it though. It's pretty greasy.
And here I thought I was taking the easy route by not asking you about the worst karaoke experience that you'd ever had.
Look, man, they wanted me to do a Tupac joint, and I'll admit that choosing Hit 'Em Up probably wasn't the best choice for me. I could try it again though. So I Get Money, West Side.
Oh, we peeped your game, dude. And we are officially off the rails here. Please don't piss off our producer. He's a real dick. Let's try to salvage this by handing out some hardware, starting with our favorite quote or piece of dialogue, Breaking Bad, the episode of Better Call Saul, not the entire television show Breaking Bad, just to keep it clear. Jamie G. Favorite line here, brother?
I've got to go back to the scene on the phone with Francesca, with Bill Oakley, with him. He switched sides and Saul immediately goes, he came out, huh? And Francesca, just with her quick wit and her ability to just kind of like, she's not like scared of Saul. She like tells Saul how it is, just immediately hits him with, he's not gay. He's now a defense attorney. I just thought that was really cool. And I like how it was set up with, as she's being followed, driving around, you see kind of where Saul's, image used to be on the park bench. It's now Oakley. So that was my favorite dialogue exchange in this episode.
It's not your jewelry, but you got your top down and your Oakleys on. I see you over there. I am going to go with a Mike line when he's in Saul's office, when he says,
years ago, I bought a Betamax. Good product, top of the line. Experts said it was better than a VHS. Turned out to be a complete waste of time and money. Let it go.
That is why I still have a mini disc player in my closet. Now it's time to give our favorite scene or moment from Breaking Bad. Again, the Better Call Saul episode, not the series Breaking Bad. I will go first here. And really, it almost has to come down to, do you want the scene with Saul and Walt and Jesse, or do you want the scene with Saul and Mike? I'm actually going to go with the scene with Saul and Walt and Jesse, just because I think that's the only one we're going to get with the three of them. It was in the Crystal Ship. I thought it was basically fucking perfect. It was entertaining. It added a little bit of depth to the relationship and made you understand how the rest of that episode of Breaking Bad, titled Better Call Saul, went down. Trying to keep it straight here. Jamie G, favorite moment of the episode of Better Call Saul titled Breaking Bad?
Well, it looks like we've got a unanimous decision, because that was my favorite. I love Saul and Mike. That scene was fantastic. But, dude, I got to be honest with you here. The scene with the three of them together, is there a better version of Saul? That is Saul in all his glory there, being his highest level Saul. That is be all you can be in the Saul army. He is like all the way Saul. The dialogue's so great. It was wonderful to kind of mesh the two worlds together the way they did. It's a big scene, man, and I got to give it its due. It is my favorite of this episode.
You do have to say that it gets a little bit more weight here, right? Because we spent so much more time with Saul that they feel more like equals. I think that's part of it, is when you were watching Breaking Bad, you felt for the most part until maybe the very end that Saul was more of kind of a sleazy lawyer. Then you start to get more idea, maybe this dude's got more going on. But again, I think that was because the show originally conceived of him as just like a 3-episode arc kind of deal. They didn't have a long game plan for him. So I think that kind of makes a lot of sense, the way it worked itself out. But now watching this scene and how confident he is in the RV, I think you could only get that after having seen, all of Better Call Saul, to understand like exactly what he's doing there and why he's so confident in everything.
Great point, Magnum Mills. And in honor of one of our favorite characters, it's time to choose our
Nacho Man. I want to be a Nacho Man.
Who is your Nacho Man or woman, the MVP of this episode of Better Call Saul, titled Breaking Bad?
I'm glad that that's so not confusing. I went back and forth on this a few times, and it's kind of hard to give it to any of the Jesse, Mike, or Walt. I don't know if there's enough there. I think I'm going with Francesca, dude. I think I'm giving it to Francesca because she's just doing her thing, right? It's a tough life. She's out there. She's trying to do the landlord thing. She tells the skunk butthole motherfuckers to go screw themselves. She gets the dough, and she's kind of like done with Saul's bullshit, right? Like she's done all that she can. I don't know if we'll ever see her again. I think we might in maybe some sort of Breaking Bad flashback. I think she's done probably in the Saul timeline. So I hope she takes that dough and like buys a better building and gets a better class of tenant or something and does her thing. So my nacho man is a woman this week. I'm giving it to Francesca, Jamie G, MVP, Breaking Bad, the episode of Better Call Saul, not the series.
I am gonna give my nacho woman as well because I'm going Kim Wexler. Now hear me out. Kim Wexler, you're sitting there, Jamie G, what are you doing? Okay, what are you trying to pull some crazy defense line here? I mean, this isn't the court of law. You're grasping at straws. Kim Wexler wasn't even in this episode. She didn't have a line. We didn't see her beautiful face. We didn't see her. She didn't bless us with her presence. But just the mere mention of Kim Wexler has set Gene into a place where we never expected him to go, and is now Kim Wexler has now became the last and major unanswered storyline, along with what's going to happen with Gene here. She's worked herself back into this, and now essentially going into the last two episodes, everything hinges on what happened on the phone, centered around Kim Wexler. She is clearly the most important piece to this complicated puzzle, and the only thing that still matters to Gene, to Jimmy, to Saul Goodman. That is why Kim Wexler is my nacho woman of this week's episode.
I'll give you that. You're going with the interesting play because it's not even a guarantee that she was on the phone. So you're just going like, just her presence is, like the magnetic force up north, which makes the compass needle move. Like she is just driving the series. And I think you're right in that. Like that's really that's what we want, right? That's the conclusion we're looking for, is the Jimmy and Kim relationship, or the Saul and Kim relationship, or the Gene and Kim relationship, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, think about it. All the talk we've had, have we ever really once debated on how much is Saul going to die? It's all in relation to Kim. We never once been like, oh, is the series going to end with Jimmy McGill's death or anything? We've never even really considered that, because that's, I don't think, the primary focus. I think that's an interesting call. I like what you're going with there. And that leads us to the point where it's time to stop thinking like Gene Takovic, because this is not a fucking Cinnabon. And, as much as someone might say once upon a time, so this is not a Wendy's. So let's start thinking like Walter White when he's writing with the red pen. He's putting the grades on the shit. We're going to give a grade to Breaking Bad, the episode of Better Call Saul. How we do this thing on Saul Over Soon is we give each episode a grade from 1 to 10. Marco's pinky rings, with 1 being the bottom, 10 being the absolute tippy top. Jamie G, how many pinky rings are you handing out here to Breaking Bad? Again, the episode of Better Call Saul, not the entire television series.
There's really nothing I disliked about this episode at all. And we got the mesh of Breaking Bad. We got Jesse and Walt. We got more Saul from peak Saul that we didn't even get to see during Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. So like new Saul, it had everything I wanted, but at the same time, it seemed like more of a chess piece kind of episode, didn't it? Just a little bit was setting up for kind of the next two, the penultimate, and then the series finale. So I don't want to go Snoop Dogg on this thing and get way high on the score, but I got to give it its due, dude. It doesn't feel right if I go any lower than 9 pinky rings. So I'm giving this thing a solid 9 pinky rings.
I mean, that is that pinky ring shit. I've been up and down in this one. I think if you really examine what happened, this is kind of more of a hangout episode, not necessarily a bottle episode, but it's back in the day you would call it filler, but it's really not, because they're trying to do so much, because what they're doing is filling in gaps in an episode of a different television series. And you could argue about like whether it matches up perfectly or whatever, but dude, the degree of difficulty they're shooting for here is crazy. I mean, this late in the game, your third to last episode of a series, and you're trying to integrate not only a beloved previous series, but also a future timeline. I mean, that is the unicycle with the plates that are on fire that have like the little top spinning on them. It's fucking wild. I have to go 9.5 here. I don't know that this was exactly what I was looking for when I heard that Walt and Jesse were going to show up. But again, like you said, nothing about it is anything that I dislike. Maybe you can make the argument that the fact that it's, there's not one standout moment, but I could argue that both the two main scenes with Saul Goodman in the RV and then with Mike are both fucking standouts. So it all comes down to what you think about the Gene timeline. I'm enjoying it because it looks like the show is going to opt to give us like a conclusive end to Jimmy McGill, which is cool. Like they could have left it very nebulous or whatever. It looks like they're going to actually make a hard decision. I respect that, whether we ultimately like it or not. I like that they're going down that road.
Yeah, and it makes a little bit more sense how we went through the first part of this season without any dedicated episode to Gene. Well, now we essentially are entering the back half of the second part of the season where we've gotten essentially 2 dedicated episodes to Gene. And I don't think we're done yet, Magnum Mills. We'll...
Prediction? Yes, prediction. Pain.
That's a perfect segue here into some predictions. On that note, do you think the remaining 2 episodes are predominantly in black and white and in the Gene timeline?
Next episode, the penultimate episode, is definitely a split again. Final episode is up in the air. I feel like it's going to be one of those things where maybe they kind of subvert our expectations. Like it's Gene, black and white, like 2/3 of the way through, and then maybe he meets up with Kim and the color bleeds back in, like Wizard of Oz style or something like that. That's what I'm going to go with here. Your thoughts on that?
We have to have, I think both episodes will have a significant chunk in the Gene timeline. I don't know how we get out of the Gene timeline. We've kind of wrapped up Jimmy. Saul's kind of wrapped. There's little things here and there that bleed into Gene, but I think the main questions remain in Gene. I think for the last 2 weeks, for better or worse, we've clearly been inside Gene in his timeline here. So I don't see any way they can pull this off the next 2 episodes without at least part of the episodes being in Gene, if not the majority of them.
I mean, it's not Billie Jean is not my lover. We can just go with Gene is not my lover. I'm feeling that. How about Francesca? Do you think we get to see her again?
Both my heart, my mind agree, and yes, I really want to see Francesca. I enjoy Francesca. Always have, always will. And I hope we get her one more time. I thought she was a really nice added element here. And I love her relationship with Saul. I just find it funny, and she's perfect for him as his, assistant. And I hope we get it one more time. But I hope she doesn't end up in jail.
I mean, that's what she said. I think I basically agree with you. I would say that I think we get her in one more Breaking Bad era scene, and not anymore in the Gene timeline. I think she's going to literally take the money and run. Can't blame her for that. In the next episode is titled Waterworks, and we saw that Kim Wexler supposedly works at Palm Coast Sprinklers. So is there a relation here, or are they just fucking with us?
Man, this is wild, isn't it, bro? Because first of all, a woman of Kim Wexler's prestige working at a sprinkler company? I mean, is it a international sprinkler company that has its own legal team? Obviously, I know she's not a lawyer anymore, but Kim will always be the best attorney for me, okay? I love Kim Wexler. I was somewhat surprised to hear she's working at Palm Coast Sprinklers. Having the next episode called Waterworks, I don't think it's going to be a fun day at the water park, like, the gang goes to the water park and Always Sunny. Like, I don't think it's going to be that type of thing. I think it's going to be very sad, and I do think there's a relation there, and I think we get closer to Kim. And Waterworks could signal crying, tears, sadness. It could be, direct correlation to the sprinklers. Can Gene get to Florida? I mean, I think there's got to be something here, right? But I also can't put it past them just being like, you know what, just to mess with them, let's time this up perfectly and have everybody in the fandom just like go crazy for a week.
As weird as this is, when this was happening on Twitter, a specific group of people who lived in Florida shouted out Titusville as being like one of the particularly worst parts of Florida to live in, both for various reasons. I think one of which being it's near kind of where the spaceships launch, like it can be loud and shit like that. But just they like went out of their way to make it feel like maybe Kim Wexler tried to move to like the worst place she could possibly think of. I'm going way out on a limb here, and I'm going to say to fuck with everyone on the planet, the entire next episode titled Waterworks is just a Kim Wexler episode. We don't see any other main characters we know. The entire penultimate episode of Better Call Saul is entirely Kim Wexler, bringing us up to date on what's happened with her in the time frame between, you know, where we last left her and where we are now. That's what I'm going with. I'm going big, baby.
Bro, that is bold statement. Now, gun to your Special Agent Johnson, will it be in black and white, or will it be in like some like Snapchat filter color or something? Like what will they do with this?
It'll start in color and then move into black and white as the timeline dictates.
Speaking of our guy and going big here, how much more Mike do we get? I really hope it's not done. It kind of seems like maybe, you know, Gus is done, and we'll talk about that. But do we get much more Mike here, or is it kind of nearing an end? I'm afraid.
Well, if I'm going with a full Kim Wexler episode, next episode, that cuts out my options. But I am going with, yes, we see Mike again. I'm going with 2 more scenes. One where he interacts with, you know, at least one of Saul, Walter, Jesse. The other where he interacts with Gus, and that's the one scene where we see Gus one more time.
So you are saying we get Gus one more time?
Yep, fuck that shit.
I'm going to go in the opposite and say we don't get Gus again. I like that you're using it just as simply as a way to get more Mike, and I'm always down with more Mike. But I think they kind of wrapped up Gus here. I don't know what more purpose Gus would serve, unless it's a, you know, when Gus was thinking about bringing on Walter, like, and we see that kind of flashback, you know, to that time frame of Breaking Bad. Other than that, I just don't see what value Gus brings at this point. He kind of had his, you know, his moment in the sun, and it kind of ran its course with Lalo.
I don't disagree with you, but if you have access to Giancarlo, use Giancarlo. That's how it works. You want to bring him in, and I think the last thing here is at the very end of the episode, we saw Gene basically tell Buddy, "You're fired, take a hike." Will that come back to haunt him?
It looked like it, didn't it? Geez, man, as Buddy was leaving, and kind of, you know, Gene's like, I shouldn't have to tell you, but you're so much of an amateur, I'm going to anyways. You know, he lays on kind of the keep your mouth shut thing. Again, a lot of like channeling De Niro here in Goodfellas. Keep your mouth shut. You know, it just felt that way. It was a little ominous the way he looked back, kind of, right? I mean, there's a reason that the mob whacks guys when they no longer play ball the way they want them to play ball. There's a reason why the cartel does too. Having a person who knows about this con just roaming out there out in the world, upset about how it went down, upset that you're stealing from a guy dying from cancer. Does that make you feel comfy? I mean, especially when you got your whole, I mean, his whole shit could blow up. So, I mean, how much jail time? You said 20 years earlier. It may be more than that.
Gene's operating off of pure emotion right here, and that's just fucking dangerous, dude. One thing I wanted to check on before it goes to a free-for-all is we had the title card here. It has been degrading, and my prediction is for the final episode, the title card is just that blue screen with like a VCR, like stop play sound, and nothing else. Like no more theme, no more anything. Just literally a blue screen and like someone, you know, pressing the old school play on a VCR and stop on a VCR or something.
Magnum Mills, has our production team done the research here where they've gone back to last week's episode where they first introduced the blue screen? Was there longer kind of intro theme music before it went blue? Because this past episode, it was like a split second and it was blue. We barely got any of the theme song. Has that shortened from week over week here, from episode to episode?
they've been actually doing it over the course of the whole season. It was more subtle at first, but now once that the timelines are condensed, it's become much more prominent. Just excellent. This is just, again, another beautiful job by a show that, once they try to make things out of their episode titles, like Fring is back, and the Breaking Bad analogy about the flight being down or whatever. They've always been willing to kind of play with the titles and the whatnot and try to send messages or whatever. And I think they did a pretty good job of this here. They did what they wanted, right? It's a prequel to one of the biggest shows ever. There's 2 episodes left, and we have no idea what's going to happen. You would think that we'd have something, right? Like, it's a prequel. They've managed to do it where we're going into the home stretch area, and we really don't know what's going to happen. And one of my last predictions is that Gene basically creates his own killer because he showed Marion how to use the internet, and now she sees him going to the garage and she's getting salty. Somehow she's going to start looking up Albuquerque when she realized she can type something in besides, cat videos. And then she's going to see a picture of Saul Goodman and be like, oh shit. And that's going to be like why those cops we see in the teaser show up and shit, because Marion calls him because she thinks she found out Saul Goodman, and then he's going to think it's Jeff, and a whole bunch of shit's going to happen.
But I do like your Marion prediction. We will find out, and don't you worry, we'll talk about it right here on the Saul Over Soon podcast. I think that's a wrap on this just amazing episode of Better Call Saul, titled Breaking Bad. What is up next for Saul Over Soon?
Well, as we have alluded to, we will be back next week to cover season 6, episode 12, the penultimate episode of Better Call Saul, which is titled Waterworks. This one is written and directed by Vince Gilligan himself, co-producer, co-showrunner, co-creator, all that shit. So, yeah, baby, strap in and or on.
It's absolutely wild that there are only two episodes of Saul left. I just can't even believe it. Thanks again for checking us out. We always appreciate it. We are grateful and gracious for your support. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and or our YouTube channel. If you've got any theories about how this thing is going to come to an end, get at us. Please drop a comment on YouTube channel or send it to sauloversoon@gmail.com. That is sauloversoon@gmail.com. Written somewhere down here. Mills, tell these wonderful people where they can find all of our content.
Right by the magic man who thinks you can just point and make things happen. I mean, yes, you can, but don't fuck with your producers that way. They can be real dicks at time. Thanks again for checking out Saul Over Soon. As Jamie G said, we're on all of your favorite podcast joints, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that. Just search for Saul Over Soon. We're on social media. Again, just look for @Saul Over Soon. Do the feedback thing. We're from the Joe Blow Football Show. You can find our YouTube channel at joeblowfootballshow.com. Love it if you could subscribe. Be ready. We got some good stuff coming out. You should be excited to hear it. And we're on social media at Joe Blow Show. We just wrapped up our coverage of The Boys from Amazon on Compound B. Again, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the joints you like at Compound B. On social media at Compound B Pod. We're about to cover the Game of Thrones spinoff, House of the Dragon, on Drunk on Dragons. Yes, we will be kind of serious, but yes, we will also be drinking. If you're going to drink, you should do it on the back of a dragon. Be ready to check that out. It's going to be an excellent time, and we can't stop, won't stop covering It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia on The Night Pod Cometh. Check us out on your favorite podcast joint, as we've said, by searching for Night Pod Cometh, and on social media at Night Pod Cometh. We are the fighter of that asshole of the day pod. Can't catch us. Won't see us in the streets. All good, baby. And thank you again for checking out Saul Over Soon. I'm Magnum Mills. He's Jamie G. And hey, we're all in the game now, right?
And it's Saul Over Soon. We'll see you here next time to discuss the penultimate episode, Waterworks.
This has been Saul Over Soon, a Better Call Saul podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. We are in no way affiliated with Better Call Saul, AMC, Sony Pictures Television, Netflix, or any other production company or association. The views here are those of the hosts only and do not represent any other entity. Thanks again for checking us out, and stay tuned because it's Saul Over Soon.